and now we're going to take us to the next two assignments here. At this point, if you take a look at your homework, you will have been instructed to open the file called chemistry.xlsx. When you open it, I want to show you now some of the things you'll be able to do for that homework. The first thing I want you to see here is that we have already entered grades in here. This is an example of how you might do a grade book where we will do a weighted average. You see, if we want to do a person's grades, like if I'm an instructor, which I am, but if I wanted to give different weights, different exams, in this example, we would have perhaps 20% of your grade would be exam 1, 20% of your grade would be exam 2, 20% of your exam, 20% of your grade would be exam 3, and 40% of your final grade would be final exam. So what we're going to do is we're going to use those percents over here in the overall column, and we're going to have it calculate what your grade would be based upon those weights. Now we have to recall from the first assignment the concept of removing of the relative address. Now the term we did not mention yet, but it's important for you to know here, is called absolute address. So when you turn off relative address, you're turning on the absolute address. Now again, I'm hoping by now you've opened this file called chemistry, and your syllabus and assignments sheet should have told you where to find that. It could either be online or wherever you're taking this class at this point. But once you've opened it, you want to make sure you go to the tab that says First Semester Scores. This is just an example of how we would apply these concepts. Now in this particular case, we're going to have you type in cell F17 equal, and then you're going to click on cell B17 times, and then you're going to click on C8. The reason for that is because you are going to have 20% of the person's final grade be exam 1 score. Now we're going to add to that, and bear with me, I'm not removing the relative address just yet. We're going to go back and do that. Or in other words, we're not applying the absolute address just yet. We will in just a few minutes. But once you do that, then we're going to go to the next grade here, which is exam 2 in cell C17, and we're going to multiply that times C9 because the exam 2 is 20% of the person's grade. Let's add the plus sign now, and then we're going to go to D17, multiply that times, in this case, C10, plus, then we're going to take the final exam times C11, because the final exam is 40% of the grade. So all we're doing is a weighted average here. Now you'll notice we could put a parenthesis in here if we wanted for each of these products or multiplication, but if you're well aware, we don't need to do that because the please excuse my dear Aunt Sally concept says it's always going to do the multiplication first anyway. Now if we hit enter here, and we fill the, and we'll see here that we've got the grade, the final grade of the overall grade for this particular student. But if we fill this down, we're going to get a bunch of gibberish here because we did not remove the relative address where we should have. So we're going to undo that fill. I'm going to go back in here. We're going to fix this so that this, the reason it gave us gibberish is because C8 changed to C9, C10, and so on. We don't want those weights over here in C8, C9, C10, and C11. We don't want those changing with relative address because we want to keep reading those percents. So if I double click on C8 and across the top where it says F1, F2, F3, hit the F4 key, then I come over here to C9 and do the same thing. Double click C9, hit the F4 key, double click C10, hit the F4 key, and double click C11 and hit the F4 key. Now we have turned off the relative address. Now notice please, we did not want to turn off the relative address for B17, C17, and D17 and E17 because when we fill this down, we do want those rows to continue to change. So if we hit enter here, we now have 78.2, and now if we fill this down, clear down to the very bottom here, we will see that all of those grades come out correctly. And let's scroll back to the top now. Now while we're here, we're also going to be asked to do the top 10 overall scores here. Well, if that's the case, we can also do that. We're going to highlight them, is what we mean. We're going to highlight them with a different color. So for them to look like what you see on your syllabus or what have you, or your assignment sheets that accompanies the syllabus, If we want just the top 10 scores to be like a reddish color here, we can do what they call conditional formatting. So the conditional formatting simply changes the colors or the appearance of what you have there, depending on what the value is. So here's how we do it. Step one, we've already done. We select the cells, and they're still selected from having filled down a few moments ago. Step two, obviously, we would go to conditional formatting. Now in conditional formatting, you'll see here we have where it says highlight cells rules, and we don't want those just now. The only time we would use that if we say we want something over 90%, in other words, or less than 60%. If we would want to do that, it would just be a way of finding who those who failed and who those got A's. But in this case, since we want the top 10 rules, we go to top and bottom rules. So if you go there and then you come over here to top 10 items, it will simply give you the colors we're looking for the top 10. Now I could say give me the top 14, I could give the top 5 by using my little arrow key here and adjusting the numbers with these up and down arrows here. But we could simply, or we could just type in a number if we want. Then if we don't like that color of light red with dark fill, we could change it and use the yellow fill with the dark yellow or the green fill, or we could come down here to custom format and use any color we want. But nevertheless, we're going to leave it at light red fill with dark red, and we simply click OK, and now we have fulfilled our responsibilities for your conditional formatting on this assignment. Next, now we're going to introduce you to a few more concepts regarding functions. We already talked about the sum function, and we have talked about the if function. Now we're going to talk about the median. The median you have to type in. You don't have that up here in one of these auto functions up in the upper right. So you're going to have to go to cell D8 in this case. We want to show exam 1 median. So if you hit the equal sign and type the word median, hit the left arrow key. Remember, every function begins with an equal and then with the prefix of telling it what it's going to do. In this case, the prefix is median because we're going to find the median. The median, for your information, if you don't know, is it simply will, after ranking the values, it'll put them in a certain order, put them actually lowest to highest, and then it's the middle value or the middle two values is going to get the average of that, and that is your median. If there's an odd number of values, it's the middle value. If there's an even number of values, it's the average of the middle two. So you type in equal median, left parentheses, and then we're going to come with our mouse and click on cell B17 and drag down to the very bottom here. And when we do, you see, we're going to select all of those cells down to B17 through B52. When you hit enter, you'll have to scroll up a little bit because by hitting enter, it moves us down one. We're going to scroll back up, and we see that the median is 86 of exam 1. So now what we're going to do is we're going to fill this down. We're going to fill this all the way down to row 12. Now please notice when we do this, it's giving us 86 and we have to fix this. So bear with me here, but we also don't want it to mess up our gray here. We want to keep the gray, so we're going to click on this little arrow right here, and we're going to say fill without formatting, and that way we don't lose the gray tone here. When you fill or copy, it brings the format with it, unless you tell it here to fill without formatting. But now these medians are not correct. They are correct for exam 1. The way to know whether or not they're correct is you're going to take a look at what they call the range finder. The range finder is something that you use on to see what in fact your function is reading. If I double click D8, you will see that this box surrounds the numbers that is actually referring to or referencing. But you see, if we do the same thing in the one below, if you double click D9, it is down one row, and again that is because of relative address. Well, we don't want it doing a row down on exam 1. We want the median for exam 2. So the easiest way to make that correct is to double click as we did and to see the range finder here, and you simply take your mouse and you place it right on this blue border here. Then you click it over 1 and up 1 so that it now reflects C17 through C52, and then you hit enter. Now let's repeat that for exam 3. We double click the median for exam 3, and now you'll see because of relative address that has gone down 2 rows. we've got to bring it over to to the exam 3 column and up 2 rows. So now that median will be reading D17 through to D52. We hit enter again, and now finally we do well, actually we got to do 2 more. We double click the median here for the final exam, and now it is down to the 4th row there because of the relative address. So we're going to drag it over and up for the final exam and hit enter. And last but not least, we'll do the overall. We double click the median here. We're going to bring it clear over here to the overall and hit enter. Now, ladies and gentlemen, actually, we just need to do the same thing with the maximum and the minimum of each of those grades, and then the range, and these will be done. So let's now do the maximum. In order to get the maximum of exam 1, we can click over here to click over in the auto sum and click max in the upper right here. The thing is, max, just like sum, it will go looking straight up for numbers. If it finds no numbers straight up, it will then go to the left for numbers, just like the sum function will. But if it doesn't find, well, in this case, we don't want the side numbers. So whenever it either comes out empty, if the parentheses are empty, which is what would happen if there's no numbers above or to the left, and the same has happened with the sum function, if you either don't get the numbers you want or the cells you want, or if it comes out empty, you simply click and drag what you do want. Well, in this example again, we're still wanting the max now, or the highest score. We want that to be of cell B17 again. You see, we're going to click and drive that all the way down, and then we're going to hit enter. Now again, we have to scroll up one again, because by hitting enter, it knocks us down one. But now you see we have the maximum here, and we have to repeat the process here as we did a minute ago. So let's fill that down, and once again we're going to change over here on the lower right here of the fill. We're going to change that to say fill without formatting. So now let's continue on here. We're now going to click on cell, let's see, we're going to double click cell E9, and then we're going to click and drag the rangefinder up and over to exam 2 here and hit enter. And just like a lot of this is just busy work now. We're going to double click from the, in this case E10, we're going to click and drag exam 3 maximum up and over, and we're going to hit enter there. Do the same thing with the maximum of E11. We're going to click and drag as before, only now we're just doing it from the maximum, bringing that over to the final exam and bringing that up and over. And then lastly, of course, we do the maximum for the overall. We're going to bring that up and over, and we hit enter. Let's do the same thing for the minimum. Hopefully by now you've got the drift here. We click on cell F8, we come up here and we click minimum, and again we don't want those in the range, so we're going to just simply overwrite that by clicking on cell B17. We go clear down to the bottom here, and then we will hit enter. As before, we have to scroll back up again, click on cell F8, pull the fill handle, but don't forget the fill handle is the lower right. It is the lower right corner there. We pull it down, and then we simply click here and say fill without formatting again. Now again, since the first one we know is right, we don't have to mess with that one as usual. But if we double click F9, you see we got to click and drag the rangefinder over and up. Then we double click F10 and pull its rangefinder over and up. Hit enter. And then the double click here of F11, we bring it over and up for the final exam. And then lastly, again for the minimum, we double click the rangefinder, bring it up and over to the overall and hit enter. Now the range here, we don't have to play around with the rangefinder because it's not going to be dealing with that. We're going to, and there is no range function. Please don't be looking for a range function. People go online, they say, how do we know the median, the max, the sum? No, we're not interested in the rangefinder. By the way, just there, we do not want you using the average function here. Please do this part of the assignment using the overall, using the way we did here. If you use the average function for that formula right there, it is not going to be counted. So let's click up here on G8 now. We're going to have equal, and the range is simply the maximum. Click on, in this case, E8, and hit the minus sign on your keyboard, and click F8, and then we hit enter. So obviously the range, or the amount from the lowest to the highest, is all we're looking for there. So now you click and pull the fill handle again down to row 12, and again don't forget to do the little fill without formatting. because if you forget to do that, you'll lose the little gray value there. Again, ignore the little dotted line here, but that's basically all you need to do for your second assignment. Now, to get it into the workbook that we started the other day, step one, make sure that that workbook is open. The one we did with the Herzog appliances there. If we want to get this other workbook we just did, the chemistry in there, here is how we do it. Step one, right click on the tab, and step two, we're going to click move or copy, and then we simply open the book to where we're going to send it. In this case, again, we name that workbook homework, so we click on homework and we click create a copy. Now we click OK, and you will see that it brings the first semester scores for the chemistry class, it brings it into the same workbook as sales or sales chart. So now you have all the information you need in order to do homework 2. Before we finish, though, before we go back to that, I want to mention we need to do one more thing here. Let's go back here. I forgot to show you how to do the count function. So let's go back here to the count function. You click up in here. It's going to be in cell B5. So if you click up there, it's equal count A. Not count, but count A, left parentheses. And then if you come over here and click and drag again the students' names here, actually that looks like an ID number. If you click and drag those and hit enter, then once again you got to scroll back up again, but if you do that, it'll count them. Now if you just do the count function, you'll notice that that will go to 0 because the count function by itself will only count numbers. So if you want to count text, you need to make sure it says count A there. So count A. That's something I forgot to show you how to do. Now don't forget, please, as the other assignments, be sure to insert a header footer. So go to insert, header footer, and then put your name right in the middle here. And the class name, just put them right in the center there. Okay, now we'll go to our next assignment, if I haven't forgotten something else here. What I would like you to do now is to open up the spreadsheet, or the workbook, I should say. Remember, there are many spreadsheets within one workbook. A workbook is a combination of many spreadsheets. So I'd like you to open the workbook named Loan, and in there you'll see it opens up with the word documentation. Just skip that and click the page or the sheet below it that says loan calculation. I'm going to show you how to do the third assignment here, and that is going to be dealing with what they call the payment function. Before we begin the payment function, I want to explain to you that this assignment is not only showing you a new function, but it is also showing you another example of how you can apply the absolute address. So it's going to be a little bit sophisticated. You have to really kind of watch your P's and Q's on this. So let's get started. Let's suppose you're trying to do an analysis of a loan you're trying to take out. And let's also suppose, for argument's sake, that you're very wealthy and you can afford a $2,000 a month payment. Let's also assume here that the interest rate that you're going to be paying is 10%. Now that's actually downright thievery, but we're just using this as an example. If you type 10% in there and hit enter, and then type 12 in cell E6, we're going to pretend that you're going to be making a monthly payment to pay off a mortgage here, depending upon how many years. We're going to put the years across here, and we're going to put the mortgage itself down this direction. So before we do the payment function, let's do some preliminaries. Let's suppose, for example, that the number of years involved with this particular loan is 10 years. So let's go to cell D10 and type in a 10. And let's come over here to cell C10, and we're going to type in there $200,000, and hit enter. Now again, you would probably be better off financially than I am if you can afford a payment like that. But we're going to try this out here now. So we're going to do the payment function in this case in D10, but then we're going to have to modify it as we continue to work with this thing. Because we're going to make some changes as we look for different scenarios. So here's how the payment function works. First of all, Microsoft will make this a negative number, and we don't want a negative number. So we're going to ask you to remove the negative. You have to type a negative in the formula, or the function rather. Remember, every function in formula starts out with equal. So we hit the equal sign and then put the negative right up front here, and that way you know you've got it. But don't put the negative before the equal. It's equal negative, and in this case the prefix is PMT, left parentheses. Now, again, this now has three arguments, just like the if function does, or the sum function has one argument, which is nothing but the range, but this has three arguments as well. However, these arguments obviously are completely different than the arguments as they are for the if function. The first argument in this particular case is going to be the interest rate per month, or per payment, I should say. Well, in that case, then, we're going to click on cell E5 because that's the interest rate, and we divide by 12. Now, if you were making quarterly payments, obviously you would have a 4 in cell E6, and you'd be dividing the interest rate by 4. Some people actually make an annual interest payment when they're making payments on bonds and things like that sometimes. But nevertheless, it's going to be E5 divided by E6 because the first argument is the amount of the interest rate, I should say, not the amount of interest, but the interest rate that you will pay per payment. So in this case, that's 10% divided by 12. Now put a comma in there, as we always do when we start a new argument. The second argument is going to be the number of payments in this month. And this is a monthly payment or quarterly payment, whatever you're doing here. It's the number of payments total on this entire loan. So that's going to be, again, the number of payments you make per year. So you click on E6 and then multiply it times the number of years, which in this case is in D9. So it's E6, which is the number of payments per year, times D9, which is the number of years. Hit the comma key because now we're finished with our second argument of the payment function. The last argument of the payment function is going to have the actual loan amount. So that is going to be in C10. So if you type that and hit enter, you will see that you would make a monthly payment of $2,643.01 if you made a payment, if you had a loan for $200,000 at 10% for 10 years. So that's a hefty amount here. Now, let's we're going to kind of zoom out a little bit on this so you can see what we're doing here. I'm going to ask you to type in here, in the second one here, $210,000 in cell C11, 210,000, and then hit enter. And one thing nice you can do, if you select the top two, not the top one, not the second one, click on them and select the two of them, and then pull the fill handle down, you will see it will give you a series that'll take you all the way down to 300,000. You see, people get that wrong because sometimes they'll just click on the top one and fill. No, that's not what I'm saying. You got to click on the first one, select the second one, and then you change down and over to the right to pull the fill handle to get a series. Let's do it again over here on the years. On the years, we're going to type a 15 here, and then we're going to simply select D9 and E9, select both of them, not one or the other, and then you come over to the right and pull the fill handle to the right, and that will give us the years. Now, the problem is we're trying to get the monthly payment for these different loan amounts and for these different years. So I'm going to ask you to pull the fill handle, and this is going to be wrong here. Well, actually, don't pull it, just watch me here, because if you pull the fill handle down, and then you wait a minute and you fill it over, we're going to get a bunch of errors here. Now, the reason for all the errors, again, is because the relative address has kicked in, and it's messed us all up. So I'm going to have you undo that if you did it with me. I'm hoping you didn't. We're going to fix this so that it's no longer messed up here. So let's double-click cell D10, and let's get the formula out here again, and let's once again analyze the items that we do or do not want to change. Now you got to watch me on this. This is not quite the same as before. Okay, the absolute address is going to be changed a little bit here, different than what we did in these last two assignments. So I'm going to have you double-click E5, hit the F4 key. That one's fine because we don't want that E5 to change at all. If we double-click on E6 and hit F4, we've got the same situation. That also will not change. Now again, the number of times per year we pay, that we don't want that to change in any circumstance. So we double-click E6 again, and we hit F4 there. Again, on all three of those, we must make sure that we do not have those move when we fill it down. We don't want the relative address kicking in on any one of those. Now the thing is with D9, if you'll double-click D9 for just a minute, which is the number of years, we do want that to change when we copy it to the right. Please remember now, Please remember that relative address works the same when you copy to the right as when you copy it down, in that when you copy it down, it changes row by row, but when you copy to the right, it does not. When you copy to the right, it does not change the rows; it changes the columns. Well, when we fill this to the right, we want the D9 to change to E9 and F9, etc. But when we fill it down, we don't want the D9 changing the rows. In order to make this right, you hit the F4 key once, then you hit it again, and that's where you leave it. You only want the $ to the left of the 9, because that means the 9 will not change when we fill it down, but the D will change when we fill it to the right. Now double-click the C10. Hit the F4 key 1, 2, 3 times, and now you will see that the 10 will move, which we want it to do. When we fill this down, we want the 10 to change to 11 and 12 so we get the different mortgages, but we do not want the C to change when we fill it to the right, because that would mess us up. So now if you hit enter here, and then you pull the fill handle and drag it down, you'll see we get all the payments we're looking for. Now if you fill it to the right, you will see here that we get all of the payments that way too. Leave it selected, please. Once again, we are going to apply here the conditional formatting. Now the conditional formatting is going to be measuring, or going to be saying simply, we want these numbers to turn green if the number is affordable. In other words, if the payment we have is beneath $2,000, we want it to be green, as in go for it. But then if the payments are above $2,000, we want those numbers to turn red in the event that that's the case. So it's like, no, we can't do that. So how do we do the conditional formatting? As we learned before, step 1, you select all the cells you want to apply the conditional formatting to. And step 2, you click conditional formatting. Now in this case, we're going to do the highlight cells rules, and we're going to click greater than. Now please remember, you can apply more than one conditional formatting to the same cells. You can add numerous conditional formattings to the same cell. So leave them selected after you do this. So we're going to say format the cells to be this light red and fill with dark red, etc. If the amount of the cell is anything greater than, select these here. We're going to click in the cell E3 if it's greater than E3. Now if you click and drag your little title bar now, you'll see that all but a few of those are going to be too much. So we click OK, and that will make those red. Now leave them selected. Now let's return to the conditional formatting, and we click up in there and we say now we're going to do the highlight cell rules less than. So if where the cells are less than, click across here again, and we're going to click on 2000. But then we're going to come over here and change the colors to green with the fill, you see, and then we click OK again. Now you'll see that the ones we can afford are the 30-year loans for anything at $220,000 or less, you see. So that is what will help us to finish our third assignment. Now again, it should look just like what you have in the sheet with the assignments paper there. Now, here's the thing, folks. Again, as always, I want you to go ahead. I believe it's asking you to put in, if it asks you for a any kind of a header, just click Insert and Header Footer, just like we do before. One other thing I want to show you, something that we really need to be aware of. Suppose I came down here and changed that interest rate to 5% and hit Enter. Please notice how all the numbers change and the conditional formatting changes. I'm going to return to those assignments we did last week again. If we come over here and change any one of these sales things, this is the beauty of spreadsheets. For example, if I change that goal to $5 million, you'll see here that we will have a completely different set of numbers over here with the store bonus. Or if the bonus is actually 2%, you see, well then the numbers will change there. This is the beauty of spreadsheets. When you change things here or in one place, everything tumbles. Now please remember, I'm going to undo this here. I'm going to put this back to where we have the original 10% so you can see it there. And I'm going to ask you now to once again send this over to your homework workbook. To remind you, you right click on it, click on the tab only now, click Move or Copy, and we're going to say send this over to the workbook. Now remember, have that homework workbook open. If you click on it and then say create a copy and send it over there, now you'll see we have the loan calculation, the first semester scores, and the sales chart. We have all those things now in our homework workbook. Please be sure to save it. Reminder, don't send me this workbook until all the homework is done and has been entered into your workbook. Thank you very much. We'll see you now in a few when you go to the next video, and the next video will be posted.